Fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GBNews.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of March. I'm Bev Turner. Today, huge COVID story. The Telegraph are calling it the Hancock files. They've seen over 100,000 messages from Matt Hancock to others in government, exposing the chaos surrounding decisions which affected every single one of us in different ways, both then and now. I'm delighted to say that Richard Tice, head of the Reform Party and partner of the journalist behind the leak, he's seen all these messages. He's going to be here exclusively just after the news. Also, police fear the missing baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon may have come to harm. The couple were arrested on Monday after 53 days on the run. It's a developing story. We will bring you the latest as it happens. Could your local pub be about to close? The British Beer and Pub Association warns that 2,000 venues are teetering on the brink and need support in the upcoming spring budget. I, for one, have been warning about this for a while. Let me know what you think. Very good morning to you. Also today, King Charles has kicked the Sussexes out of Frogmore Cottage. Quite right too. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let me know your thoughts on everything we're discussing this morning. But first, let's get you up to date with what's happening here and around the world with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Bev. Exactly 2 minutes past 10. Here's the latest. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock reportedly rejected advice from the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic. The Telegraph newspaper claims that Mr Hancock was advised to test all residents going into English care homes for COVID, not just those arriving from hospital. The article, which cites leaked WhatsApp messages, claims Mr Hancock was concerned that this would get in the way of his target of 100,000 daily tests. A spokesperson for the MP says the messages have been stolen and doctored to create a false story. Mountain rescue volunteers have joined the search for a missing baby in Brighton. It comes after the newborn's parents, Constance Martin and Mark Gordon, were further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The couple were captured on Monday night after almost 2 months on the run. Our reporter Mark White has more details.
Throughout the morning, mountain rescue teams as well as other specialist search teams have been arriving here to help those hundreds of police officers already at this location in this increasingly frantic search for the infant of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. They have, we're told, been uncooperative with police since their arrest on Monday evening. It was obvious, according to detectives, that the pair had been living outside, living rough for quite some time, and that's why the search operation is now concentrated on open spaces to the north end of Brighton, a 91 square mile search grid that they're currently looking at. And
we'll keep you up to date with all the latest on that story first here on GB News. Now, the president of Greece says she's cutting short a visit to Moldova following a train collision which killed at least 36 people and injured more than 80. An intercity train carrying over 300 passengers hit a freight train travelling in the opposite direction near the city of Larissa. The crash caused carriages to catch fire, with rescuers working through the night to find survivors. Labour claims the Prime Minister oversaw nearly £27 billion worth of wasteful government spending during his times as Chancellor and Chief Secretary to the Treasury. The party has compiled a report of so-called extensive waste, which includes money lost due to fraud and faulty personal protective equipment during the pandemic. The figures cover 2 financial years whilst he was in office. However, Conservative Party Chair Greg Hands has labelled the report a dodgy dossier. UK house prices fell by 1.1% year-on-year in February, according to the Nationwide Building Society, marking the first annual decline since June of 2020. Now, last month, the average house price was around £257,000. Prices are now 3.7% lower than their peak in August of 2022. Professor of Economics at King's College London, Jonathan Portes, says he's not surprised by these figures.
We were expecting the housing market to weaken, both as a result of the general weakness in the economy and the squeeze on real incomes as a result of high inflation, but also, of course, the quite sharp rise in interest rates over the last year or so.
A new report by MPs says NHS England will miss key recovery targets, including those for cancer treatments. The Cross-Party Public Accounts Committee says plans to tackle the COVID backlogs are already falling short and based on over-optimistic assumptions about winter health demands. It says the proportion of people receiving timely cancer treatment has fallen to a record low of 62%. The report also says the capacity of adult social care must improve if the recovery plan is to succeed. Well, teachers are striking today in the Midlands and eastern regions of England in a long-running dispute over pay. It's the second day of regional walkouts by members of the National Education Union, and it affects 200,000 staff. Many schools are either restricting access to pupils or fully closed. And new details have been discovered during cleaning and conservation work to prepare King Charles's coronation chair. Experts say they found previously undiscovered parts of a figure. It reveals more information about the chair's lavish construction 700 years after it was made. Henry VIII, Charles I, Queen Victoria and the late Queen Elizabeth were all crowned in the historic seat. OK, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Bev.
Very good morning to you. Now, regardless of which side of the fence you sat on, throughout lockdowns and the COVID 2 years, I would say we're still dealing with the hangover of it. Today's stories, messages in the Daily Telegraph are relevant to all of us. The Telegraph is splashing huge on this. They're calling it the Hancock files. There will be more messages revealed over the next few days. The Telegraph have had access to 100,000 WhatsApp text messages that were being swapped between Matt Hancock and various people in the government, huge decision makers at the time of the pandemic. Now, those of us who really wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes might be a little frustrated that not all of the questions are being answered in here. The messages have been revealed by Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel is the ghostwriter who worked with Matt Hancock on his book, and she has now chosen to release these messages to the newspaper. I'm joined now by Richard Tice, who's the leader of the Reform UK party, but he's also, today, the partner of Isabel Oakeshott. Richard, great to see you. Let me start with this question about Isabel's motivation. She obviously had the trust of Matt Hancock. Being a ghostwriter for a politician is a very trusting position. Was it an easy decision for her to make over your kitchen table as to whether to go this one step further?
Yeah, good morning. Look, Bev, the reality is that it wasn't an easy decision, but you'll understand as a journalist, the issue is what is in the overriding strategic public interest. And what became clear is that this is so significant, the difference between what we were all being told at the time by Matt Hancock and other ministers, as well as the Prime Minister and advisors, relative to the evidence that was actually that they were looking at, or indeed very often the lack of evidence. And that our real concern here, Bev, is that the public inquiry in the UK is literally just starting as we speak. And it looks like it's going to take at least 5 years, probably 10 years, cost hundreds of millions of pounds. And let's just consider, we need to learn the lessons, and we need to learn them rapidly about what went well and, bluntly, what went badly. Sweden's already finished its inquiry a year ago. France is well on the way through its inquiry. We can't wait for this. And it's really important that the public understand the extent to which our politicians didn't tell us the truth all the way through these lockdowns, and the consequences of that, and the fact that so much of it, do you remember those words? We're making the right decisions based on the best science at the right time. It turned out that wasn't the case. Very often they were making decisions to suit their own political expediency and ignoring some of the right advice and completely refusing to look at advice from other people.
What I've seen so far, Richard, and I imagine there's more of this to come over the next few days from the Telegraph. The interesting thing is, as you say, the topics that they weren't discussing on WhatsApp. Is there going to be more to come about infection fatality rates in the young, a cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns and closing schools, the logic of indiscriminate vaccination of all age groups without a cost-benefit analysis? Do we know if there's more to come about those particularly big topics? Today's largely about care homes. I want to come on to that in a minute. But what else is still to come?
There is lots still to come, Bev, across a whole range of subjects, some of which you've touched on. The issue of schools, why were they closed for so long? Sweden didn't shut its schools and ruined the education. The issue of masks, the issue of vaccines. There's lots to come. And, that will flow over the coming days. Because
how shocked were you when you were looking at these with Isabel? Were you shocked to see that it was mainly driven by political motivations, perhaps, or wanting to look good compared to other countries, wanting to look good compared to, say, Nicola Sturgeon? We know that featured in the book that Isabel wrote. Was your mind slightly blown about the fact that they weren't looking more at scientific data?
Look, the reality is, what these messages, they proved what we feared. And that those of us who were sceptical of the lockdowns and the merits of them, we feared what was going on. These messages provided the proof, and the conclusion had to be it's in the national interest, actually, not only for the UK, but actually internationally as well, Beverly. We have to learn the lessons, and we have to learn them really fast. And our real concern here is that the inquiry will turn out to be literally a whitewash, an establishment cover-up to show that everybody did the best thing, and that simply isn't the truth. And people deserve the truth.
Here's my concern. I share that worry that the COVID inquiry will be a whitewash. It will conclude we should have locked down harder, faster. We should have had more restrictions, more mandates. And I don't want us to live in a country like that, because when the World Health Organization trigger the next pandemic, then we are going to be under all sorts of draconian controls. But here's my thought on this today. This story that has broken, which is that Matt Hancock rejected Chris Whitty's advice on care home testing, that nobody should go back to a care home from the community until they're tested. This is being taken, almost interpreted today, that it was the wrong decision because it wasn't strict enough. But can we just talk a little bit about why it was important, even those of us who are lockdown sceptics, why it was important to protect the elderly? Deaths in care homes in that first wave, in fact, throughout the pandemic, went up 76%. That's why this matters today, isn't it?
Look, it matters hugely because he lied to us. He lied to everybody. He said consistently that a protective ring was thrown around the care homes. It wasn't. We suspected it wasn't. This is the proof that it wasn't. And those of us, for example, that was part of the pre-pandemic planning that had been agreed that was then completely abandoned. And when the Great Barrington Declaration came out in the autumn of 2020, those of us that promoted it, whether sort of political leaders, campaigners, or indeed the scientists and experts who promoted it, we were all smeared. We were labelled as killers. We were verbally attacked by the establishment and by political leaders in the most brutal way, when actually it turns out we were right, and this is the proof, and the evidence over the coming days will reinforce that. And it's so important that
I've got a statement. Obviously, Matt Hancock and his team are furious this morning. It's no exaggeration to say that. What is your and Isabel's relationship like now with Matt Hancock and his team after this?
Their response, Beverly, actually shows how they're always on the attack. They refuse to admit the possibility that they could have done anything wrong at all. And it's quite extraordinary. And in a sense, he's still on the attack. Rather than say, look, actually, this was really difficult. We were moving at incredible speed. Yes, we got some things right. Yes, we made some mistakes. We were trying to motivate people. There's none of that. It's that constant, egotistical, I did everything right, I'm the great man Hancock with everybody around me. This is the proof that wasn't the case. And in so many ways, we as a nation are paying the price for those mistakes that were made at the time over a long period. And the absolute refusal to consider an alternative course of action. And as a nation, we have to have trust in our leaders. And this is why you have to look at both sides of an argument as leaders and then make a judgment and bring the people with you, saying, we've looked at both sides and for this reason or that reason, we've gone down this route. OK. All right. Thank you, Richard. Thanks very much for talking to us this morning. Richard Tice there, partner of Isabel Oakeshott, the journalist responsible for leaking these messages. A spokesperson for Matt Hancock says these stolen messages have been doctored to create a false story that Matt rejected clinical advice on care home testing. This is flat wrong. On April the 14th, Matt received a response to his request for advice from the chief medical officers that testing was needed for people going into care homes, which he enthusiastically accepted. Later that day, he convened an operational meeting on delivering testing for care homes, where he was advised it was not currently possible to test everyone entering care homes, which he also accepted. Matt concluded that the testing of people leaving hospital for care homes should be prioritised because of the higher risks of transmission. As it wasn't, no possible mandate, everyone going into care homes was tested. The Telegraph have doctored the messages by excluding a key line from the text by Alan Nixon. Nixon says, I wasn't in testing meeting. Nixon says, I wasn't in testing meeting, which changes the context of the exchange depicted in the article. It demonstrates there was a meeting at which advice on deliverability was given. By omitting this, the messages imply that Matt simply overruled clinical advice. That is categorically untrue. He went as fast as possible, to expand testing and save lives. This story categorically shows that the right place for this analysis of what happened in the pandemic is in the inquiry. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Moving on. Mountain rescue volunteers have joined the search for a missing baby in Brighton. It comes after the newborn's parents, Constance Martin and Mark Gordon, were further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. Over 200 police officers have been searching over 90 square miles of land, with the risk to the baby believed to be extremely high. Former Met Detective Peter Blexley joins me now. Good morning, Peter. Last time I spoke to you, we were talking about the missing mother, Nicola Bully, another missing person story here. The bit that I'm a little bit baffled about, Peter, is how this couple could have been charged at the moment with gross negligence manslaughter. Just explain that to us.
Well, they've been further arrested for that offence. On Monday night, when they were detained, they were arrested on suspicion of an offence of neglect. And then yesterday, they were further arrested for gross negligence manslaughter. Now, of course, the police cannot make it publicly known the evidence and the information that they will have gathered so far. However, this is, of course, a very worrying development, because I'm sure there are many people, including myself, that sincerely hope that this young baby would be found alive. But bearing in mind yesterday's development, the vast resources they're applying to the search today, I think the likelihood of this youngster being found are diminishing, sadly, by the hour.
It's extremely unusual, Peter, isn't it, that a couple, well, the whole case is extremely unusual, but what I'm slightly baffled with is when it isn't that unusual, actually, for mothers to give birth and not want to have their baby, but not to dump that baby effectively. That's been going on for, since time immemorial. How unusual is it in this day and age for a mother to not tell the police what's happened to that child?
Well, of course, the police have been very careful with their language with regards to Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. They've said that this was a search for them, that they were missing. They didn't use words like, we are hunting them, they are fugitives. But clearly, there is a lot that lies behind this story, and I am aware of a lot of that. But because I do not want to talk myself into a contempt of court case, I have to be extremely guarded, responsible and careful about what I say. What I would say to your viewers and listeners is that this couple have been together since about 2016, so for some years, and I'll leave it at that in that regard. The police have been, as I say, very careful with their use of language, with the release of information. There are clearly matters which they simply cannot breach. But I thought that last week, as the Nicola Bulley case faded from the front pages, the Met Police did a very well-timed press conference as soon as they possibly could, as soon as they could get airtime and column inches, and they brought this case once again to the public attention, and just a few short days later, Constance and Mark were arrested. So I think credit where credit's due in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Peter Blexley there, former Met detective. Thanks very much for letting me know about that. Right, 2,000 pubs are facing closure. British Beer and Pub Association has warned as it calls on the government to extend a lifeline to the sector in the next budget. Michael Keel is the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Michael, thank you for joining me this morning. Now, you have been in my thoughts quite a lot in the last few months, would you believe? Because I think we spoke just before Christmas and you said a lot of hostelries, pubs, restaurants will make it through Christmas. They will just about reap the benefits in January. And when we get into February and March, that is when they are going to fall off this economic cliff. Has that basically proven to be right?
Without a doubt. I mean, we have recently done a big report alongside people like BBPA and UKH, which have clearly highlighted that many of businesses across the sector, both nighttime economy, nighttime culture economy and hospitality in general, are going to see a really, really challenging trading period. The actual cost to trade at the moment is untenable. Hence the reason why you see the report coming out from BBPA and Emma that we are going to lose 2,000 plus pubs. We're seeing a lot of pressure on the cultural sector. And the main pressures that we're seeing are with independent businesses, those standalone pubs that make up the real sort of important sort of community bases for many people across the country.
And what do you need the Conservatives to do in this upcoming spring budget, Michael?
Well, we need the financial headroom to survive. What we are at the moment is in survival mode. 8 out of 10 businesses are either barely breaking even or losing money. The margins are very thin. The productivity, the investment in what we're doing has literally dried up. So what we need really is a VAT cut across the board. We need them to look at lowering the multiplier for business rates. And we also need them to revisit the energy relief scheme, because at present we're still paying 2 to 300% of pre-COVID period costs. So for us, what people don't realise is there is a direct and indirect impact. And many of the supply chain obviously will see those increasing costs for energy and pass those on to the front line businesses. And as you can appreciate, with people having less disposable income, it is very, very difficult for us to pass that on in our pricing, because that will also impact in terms of frequency of visit, dwell time and spend.
OK. All right. Thank you, Michael, for keeping us updated on that. We will watch what they do in the budget for the pubs and the hospitality industry. It's absolutely vital part of the British landscape, isn't it? Now, thanks, Michael. Still to come, King Charles has decided he's telling him, sling your rock, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle out of Frogmore Cottage. Find out why later.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Very good morning. It's 10:27. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Still to come this morning, a video has gone viral over social media this week showing old versus young in a dispute that you mustn't miss. It is both funny and heartbreaking all at the same time. But first of all, the lockdown files. Right. Hello, guys.
Hi.
Hi. My guests are here with me. I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted. I'm reading the paper. So the Telegraph have gone really, really, really big on this. Mike Parry and Samantha Smith are both with me. The lockdown files. I can't have you both here without reflecting on this.
Sure.
Samantha, let me start with you. You're new to this show. I haven't met you before. Marvellous to have you. What's your reaction when you see this on the front of the paper?
Well, I think it's amazing how quickly his public PR campaign has crumbled. I remember I was working, I don't know whether you might notice, but I was working in Parliament through the pandemic before I went off to university. I worked there through the height of lockdown. And I remember at the time within Westminster, many behind the scenes were questioning the legitimacy of the policies that were being implemented and just how far they were going with the lockdown guidelines. You know, people were being robbed of their lives and their freedoms for months on end, while Matt Hancock was living at large. And the idea that he genuinely believed that he would be able to escape public scrutiny by going on I'm a Celeb and attending the Jingle Bell Ball. Yeah, it's you know.
So but when you were asking those questions, if you questioned the logic. Or the rationale, the science behind those decisions, what were you met with?
It was very much shut up for the sake of the public messaging. You know, there was a great deal of internalised fear, I would say. For when it came to MPs, government ministers, it was sort of a no-go subject. The word of the health bosses were God at that point. And so for it now to be emerging that Matt Hancock was simultaneously preaching that they were following the science whilst also disregarding it behind closed doors calls into question the legitimacy of his entire policy making during that period.
I guess he would say he isn't here to defend himself, and I never like to talk about somebody in their absence. Well, I don't often mind if it's Matt Hancock, but this is quite serious stuff. I don't mind slagging him off when he's in the jungle, Mike, but, you know, this is talking about serious professional misconduct, effectively. You know, should they be charged with any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, in public office? So when you... You know, when you make decisions in public office, which frankly...
policemen get charged for misbehaving in public office, that kind of stuff. Look, it's not just Matt Hancock, this story. First of all, it took me about 2.5 hours to read it all. And at the end, I wasn't surprised about what I was reading. You know what I mean? So I'd have covered it in the book and everything, but in a much shorter version, so it could be brought together. Because Sam's just brilliantly explained the Matt Hancock position. But as I was reading through it, I was astonished at the level of incompetency of the whole Boris Johnson government when they were literally, instead of having cabinet meetings to discuss the major issues of the day on the biggest pandemic we've had to deal with since the Second World War, they were doing it on WhatsApp, exchanging messages on WhatsApp and basically having cabinet meetings when Hancock was in one place, Boris Johnson was in another, and Boris simply didn't seem to have the organisational brain or the will to... You can imagine if Mrs Thatcher was in charge, she'd have demanded hour-long cabinet meetings before she went out there with the medical experts and started giving them the right to run the country. She was a scientist, of course, and Johnson wasn't. But the sheer incompetence of the way the government handled it is what came over to me.
I agree with you. The thing is, as well, there's a lot of stuff in here that I already knew.
Yes, exactly.
I remember saying on TV in spring 2020, you weren't on that particular show, but I know you and I locked horns about this for a few times over the years.
Yeah.
And I said, people right now are going from hospitals into care homes who are COVID positive. And I was roundly shouted down by another contributor, said, that is a disgusting thing to say. You have no evidence of that. And I said, I've spoken to people who are running care homes. It's my job. I'm a journalist. It's my responsibility to understand this.
But there's no evidence of them being tested. That was the point.
Yes.
There was no evidence.
The idea that there was this ring of steel around them is clearly nonsense. But do you now, Mike, as somebody who was very much... you were frightened of COVID, and you and I had a different interpretation of events. Do you now look at this and think that you were lied to?
I think it's sheer incompetence rather than lies.
On your part?
No, sheer incompetence on the way the government handled it, right? I think you're right. I think everybody individually had to make up their own mind. And I always said in the day, I said, if you want to shield, shield. If you want to lock yourself down, lock yourself down. But don't make it a national policy based on variable scientific data.
Yeah.
Because it is variable.
And there were two sides to that, and they only ever looked at one, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, OK, thanks, guys. Good start. Still to come, King Charles has decided to kick out Harry and Meghan from Frogmore Cottage. Find out why in 2 minutes.
32 minutes past 10, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock reportedly rejected advice from the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic. The Telegraph newspaper claims that Mr Hancock was advised to test all residents going into English care homes for COVID, not just those arriving from hospital. The article, which cites leaks WhatsApp messages, claims Mr Hancock was concerned that this would get in the way of his target of 100,000 daily tests. A spokesperson for the MP says the messages have been stolen and doctored to create a false story. Mountain rescue volunteers have joined the search for a missing baby in Brighton. It comes after the newborn's parents, Constance Martin and Mark Gordon, were further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The couple were captured on Monday night after almost 2 months on the run. The president of Greece says she's cutting short a visit to Moldova following a train collision which killed at least 36 people and injured more than 85. Last night, an intercity train carrying over 300 passengers hit a freight train travelling in the opposite direction near the city of Larissa. The crash caused carriages to catch fire, with rescuers working through the night to find survivors. And UK house prices fell by 1.1% year-on-year in February, according to the Nationwide Building Society, marking the first annual decline since June of 2020. Now, last month, the average house price was around £257,000. Prices are now 3.7% lower than their peak in August of 2022. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back to Bev.
Now, it looks like Frogmore Cottage will no longer be the home of Harry and Meghan in the UK. Prince Charles is going to kick them out. See you in a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:37. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. You've been getting in touch with lots of your views about the COVID files. Neil says all this in hindsight. Reporting is just delaying us from moving on. And Jim says COVID was a nasty time for all of us, in my opinion. Matt Hancock was thrust into a situation by misfortune. He never experienced anything like it before. I believe he was doing his best. Right. A clip this week has gone viral on social media. Let's have a listen and a watch.
Oh, I don't want to move.
There is a bench literally up there.
Why didn't you go film from that bench then?
Because I'm already filming here. I was filming while you were.
Enough said. Look, if you don't like the answer, don't ask the question.
Well, I was asking something nice, but now I'm kind of telling you. You're in the shot now.
You're telling me?
So, if that was a little bit confusing for you, let me explain it. That was a lady who was doing what's called a live Instagram video to her followers, and she set up the tripod with the phone on it, and a bloke comes and sits on the bench behind her and then refused to move. And she asked him quite nicely and he said no. So let's just work out what's going on in this, because it's about the generations fighting each other and about whether influencers think that they are entitled to do such things. So social media influencer Ollie London joins me now. Ollie, good morning to you. Great to see you. I had really mixed feelings when I saw this video because I felt quite sorry for the girl who was trying to do her little fitness video live to her followers, and then there's this curmudgeonly old bloke in the background, doesn't really understand what she's doing. What was your take on it?
You know, I actually had the opposite opinion, Bev. I actually sided with the man because I thought this is a typical example of a Generation Z millennial. They're an influencer. And, you know, people that are influencers, it kind of goes to their head. You know, they have people watching their live, they have likes, they have thousands of followers. It kind of goes to their head. And I actually think she was in a public place. She could have simply moved the tripod. You know, she wasn't doing anything extravagant. She wasn't doing backflips. She was literally just talking to the camera. So I think she could have just slightly repositioned her tripod and let the older man just sit there, because at the end of the day, you know, we have to have respect for older generations, and I think many millennials and influencers per se seem to have a lack of respect for other people these days.
Do you really? Because you see, I was watching this and I just felt a bit sorry for her. Like, this might be how she makes her money, as crazy as that might sound. I particularly like the line when she said, all my followers are watching, and he said, followers? Who are you? Jesus Christ, have you got followers? Which has just showed the complete misunderstanding of those two generations. It was a real culture clash, wasn't it? Do you think we're just going to get to a time, though, we're moving to a time where we just have to understand that you see somebody with a phone on a tripod in a public place, that might be their job, that might be how they're earning their money that day.
Right. I mean, if I walk past someone, like sometimes you go to the gym, you see people with a tripod, I just avoid being near them because I can see they're obviously doing a live stream. But, you know, certain people in older generations, they don't get that. And they just think, oh, you know, they're just taking a silly picture, or they're just doing a video, they can do it anywhere. I mean, she was in a park. You know, I can sort of understand what she was trying to say, but at the same time, it was a public place. You know, if she wants to do a fitness video, maybe do it somewhere slightly more private, or, you know, not near a bench.
Well, I guess she's probably, I'm presuming she didn't get to do the filming, but I imagine she's probably going to do some tricep dips on the bench, or show people how they could use the bench for exercise if they're going for a walk, something like that. I think it also, Ollie, it shows kind of that we're so divided, aren't we, as a society at the moment? It feels like everybody's on the verge of wanting a row when you walk down the street, and they're looking for reasons to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that since the pandemic. You know, there's a lot more tension. People are a lot less understanding. And it is true, you know, many influencers do rely on doing TikTok lives for making money and business and stuff. But it is also important to recognize that there are other generations that don't understand all of this influencer stuff. They don't get it. So, you know, if that man saw someone with a tripod, he doesn't understand what a TikTok live is, you know, so I kind of have sympathy with the guy.
She did sort of come over a bit like, she was like, you know, excuse me, would you mind? I'm doing a video. And you could see instantly, like, lit his touch paper, didn't he? Like, well, who do you think you are? What do you mean you're doing? What do you mean you're doing a video? Why do I have to move if you're just doing a video? Ollie, thank you, though, so much. It's something that we're going to have to work out, the rules of the modern world, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me, influencer Ollie London there. Right, let's talk about Harry and Meghan, shall we? King Charles is believed to be evicting Harry and Meghan from Frogmore Cottage, leaving them without a UK home and offering the property to... guess who? Prince Andrew. The palace have purportedly chose to evict the couple after the release of Spare, with Charles wanting the Duke of York to move into the 5-bedroom property. Royal sources are calling this a bizarre move by the King. Well, let's speak to Michael Cole, royal commentator and writer, and no stranger to GB News. Michael, lovely to see you again. Well, this is a bit of a shocker, isn't it? Prince Charles has turned bossy landlord, kicked out his son and brought in his scandal-ridden brother.
What do they say, Bev, about revenge being a dish best eaten cold? Well, I think that even applies to royal porridge here. What we're seeing is the swinging fist of majesty. Having waited 70 years to inherit the throne, King Charles is certainly asserting himself here. It's worth just having a little think about what has happened. Frogmore Cottage was a rather ramshackle collection of houses for accommodating royal servants. And then when there was needed a replacement for Nottingham Cottage at Kensington Palace, where they had been living, Meghan and Harry had been living, Frogmore Cottage underwent a huge renovation, cost £2.4 million of taxpayers' money. and they moved in. Or it must be said absolutely at the beginning that Harry repaid all that money when all the oodles of cash started to flow in from people like Netflix and Penguin Random House. So he did pay for the renovations. I mean, the Sussexes hardly had time to undo their boxes. Before, of course, they moved out. They did a runner, first of all, to Canada and then down to California, which may have been Meghan's always intended destination. At the moment, this actually recognizes reality because they haven't lived there for a long time and they're hardly likely to come back having said such unkind and cruel things that they have said on their videos and in his book Spare. And at the moment, it's being lived in by Harry's cousin, Princess Eugenie, and her husband, Jack Brooksbank, and their child. Now, the intriguing thing, and you've mentioned it, is about Royal Lodge. Now, Royal Lodge is an absolutely wonderful white wedding cake of a huge lodge set in 98 acres of Windsor Great Park, where the Queen Mother lived and indeed where she died. And that's been occupied by Prince Andrew. And in a bizarre arrangement, which I don't think you'll find on every street, his ex-wife, after 26 years after the divorce, Fergie, also lives with him there. Now, I think what is happening behind the scenes here is that the king is saying, look, to my younger brother, Prince Andrew, you're not doing any royal work. Do you really need this huge house? I think more modest accommodation would be in order. Why don't you move a mile down the road and take over Frogmore Cottage? Now, that will go down extremely badly with Prince Andrew.
OK, all right. Thank you, Michael. It's fascinating, isn't it? Michael Cole there, royal correspondent. Don't forget, if you're just joining us, big story this morning, Matt Hancock. There's a scandal over whether he ignored the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic, which led to death. He robustly denies that. We're going to bring you up to date on all that soon. But I want to talk to my panel now about that story, Mike Parry. What do you think about the royal move? It's sort of like EastEnders, but with a lot more beautiful architecture.
Look, this is not just a reorganisation of where the members of the royal family live. This is a massive humiliation. Michael Cole, massive great expert and great colleague of mine over the years in the royal family. The Windsor Great Lodge that he's moving out of, Royal Lodge, has 36 rooms. Frogmore Cottage has just 5 bedrooms. It is a massive humiliation to say to Prince Andrew. I mean, Michael described it as a big white wedding cake of a home, but it's the grounds within which it stands. From the gate up to the house is a long drive, in a convoy of cars. Whereas Frogmore Cottage, you can walk there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. It's a demotion.
Oh, it's a massive demotion, and I can't see Prince Andrew taking it up. But the way that Charles has sort of engineered it very cleverly is he said, well, Prince Andrew's got to move out because he can't afford the rent anymore. Because he's had to pay some of the 12.1 million in the court settlement he was ordered to pay against the lady in America who has accused him, Virginia Giuffre, absolutely. He now hasn't got any cash. He supposedly sold a huge villa in Verbier in Switzerland and got 11.1 million back. But there was about a £7 million mortgage on that that property anyway. And this most bizarre arrangement where he still lives with Fergie, the two of them couldn't possibly move into Frogmore Cottage on their own.
She's not going to want to move in there, is she, Samantha?
What about the servants?
What about the staff?
What about the servants? If it's only got 5 bedrooms, right?
She's going to have to get the cleaner in once a week, isn't she? That's the best she can be able to hope for.
It's a huge humiliation.
Go on.
Yeah, I think that Mike's absolutely right here, and that this is not Prince Andrew being brought back into favour. It's a massive humiliation and killing 2 birds with 1 stone, really, from Prince Charles. I think the headline really should be, when it comes to Harry and Meghan, privileged couple face the consequences of their actions. I think when it comes down to it, this entire disaster and their downfall is entirely of their own making.
Yes,
and I think that the public favour and sympathy towards Harry and Meghan ran out months ago in the UK. It's quickly fading in the US as well because, frankly, royals aren't held with the same sort of loyalty and regard as they are in this country. They're nothing more than D-list celebs there. And once the endorsement deals start to dry up and the Netflix documentaries stop rolling in,
do you think
there'll be nothing left.
They'll buy a British home?
No.
I don't think they will.
How could they show their faces here?
This is another factor in this. If Charles suddenly says there's nowhere for you to stay anymore, they're not going to come back because that in itself is a humiliation. Because it means they've been pushed further out of the royal circles when you can't even guarantee a safe and secure place to put your head down when you come to this country. It should keep them away.
They wanted royal security.
Yes.
Exactly. They haven't even got a royal pad to escape to.
No, they haven't. No.
Right, moving on. Green Apple, clever headline. Users are fuming as a new feature being given to Apple phones, which will... I don't know how this works. I don't understand the technology of this, Sam. She says, looking to you as the youngster who might get the tech. But basically, if you've got your Apple phone plugged into a plug socket to charge it and it isn't using green energy, it will charge it more slowly to blackmail you, to cajole you, to coerce you into changing your behaviour, to change the planet.
Yes, and this technology isn't new. I don't know whether... I have an iPhone. I don't know whether you both are iPhone users, but...
I have a landline.
They... Not fax machine.
I've got a steam telephone.
This technology has already been implemented. They have this thing called optimized battery charging, where if you plug in your phone overnight, the technology decides when it should charge and how fast it should charge your iPhone for you. The fact that I think this is just the latest in a string of dodgy and very, very opaque new policies that Apple has brought in, it suggests that the public are being misled once again. We saw it a few years ago with the slowing down the battery life and the systematic shutdown of iPhones to reduce their shelf life and force people to buy new phones. That was scrapped by Apple after the public found out, and there was rightfully massive outcry. So the lack of transparency from tech giants just it makes people wonder, where will the line be drawn? How far will tech giants take it in controlling our freedoms and controlling our lives? Even things as simple as just when I want my phone charged. Who are they to decide?
I wonder whether they're showing their hand too quickly. All this is coming at a rate of knots. At some point, there's going to be a rebellion.
Well, it's coming at a rate of knots, but it goes whoosh right over my head like that. Also, of course, won't it mean that it's going to cost more to charge your phone if it takes longer to charge it, and that it might be an initial cost? But look, for somebody of my generation, when I read things like, to deactivate clean energy charging, go to settings, clicking battery, then battery health and charging, and I mean, I'm lost.
So that's if you can remember your password when you get there.
That's right. A couple of days ago, I put out a slightly controversial tweet, right? And people wanted to respond, and then they started some message saying, you've turned off the reply button or something. And I wasn't aware I'd turned off any reply button, so I started getting abuse. You're running away from what you said. I couldn't find the reply button to switch it back on. So for me, I'm sorry, it's in my pocket. I take it out, I make a call, send a text, send a tweet. That's it.
It's time to return to the days of the Motorola.
It certainly is.
It
really is. But isn't this why what Mike is expressing there? This idea that it's too difficult for us to understand, and that's how the tech companies get away with this rather sort of subversive means of changing it. So basically, they put this on, this clean energy charging, they put it on secretly with the update. You know, it will say your phone needs to update the software. I've not been doing mine for about 6 months. He's trying to ask me to do it. I haven't done it. And that's how they do it. And then you've got 3,000 words of terms and conditions, which everybody ignores and just clicks yes, OK, anyway. How do we get more awake to this stuff?
Well, I think quite frankly, it's too little, too late. We as a society are entirely dependent on our phones. Everything, our calendars, our text messages, our contact with our friends, maps, everything is now online in this digital database. And who has control over that? The tech companies. I don't think there's any way for us to claw back control without some significant government intervention. I'm a classic free market conservative. I don't like the idea of government stepping in and over-regulating. isolating. But when it comes to companies like Huawei, TikTok, even Apple, yes, there's a massive lack of transparency when it comes to the actions of tech
Sam,
companies.
explain this to me. It seems Apple's iOS 16 has come with many issues. The tech giant rolled out a dire update to patch vulnerabilities.
Yes.
One of the issues is in WebKit, a Safari browser engine. What's a Safari browser engine?
It's all tech rigmarole.
You go up and down the savannah in it, don't you?
It's all tech rigmarole, and I'm finding it very, very difficult to, as a young person, the resident young person, I was always the one who my nan would go to when she said, oh, I've gone and logged out of my Facebook and I've made 4 new accounts. How do I fix this? Now, how are we supposed to bridge that divide between the older generations who are trying to feel safe on the internet, feel in control of these devices that are seemingly doing whatever they want without our say-so, our permission?
Isolated. That's my concern, is that the elderly who aren't as in control of this tech. My dad's he literally has a Nokia brick.
Yes.
Occasionally he calls me on it, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, society is becoming closed. It's literally blocked out for people who aren't involved in the tech.
I don't think naturally isolated, because as you quite rightly say, sometimes old people just need a big phone and unable to contact their children or something like that. So it's not isolated. What it is it's introducing all sorts of options on a phone that you're not aware that you're activating. Because, as I've just said, I've switched something off on my phone, but I don't know how, you know what I mean? And that's the difficulty, making phones far too complicated for the average brain. Well, I haven't got an average brain.
And not being able to park your car, not being... This reliance that we have...
Everything seems to be controlled by an app nowadays, and it really... I mean, they talked about it at one point during the pandemic, the idea of, you know, digital health cards and these Amazon stores that you see where you walk in and it detects what you're picking up in the store. And you exit and it charges your account automatically. It all seems like these big, and I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on, but it sounds like big businesses are creating a monopoly over our lives, and eventually we're going to reach a point where we can't do anything without big tech say so. Where do we draw the line?
It's the most genius business model, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because it renders us all incapable of operating in the modern world without it, and yet, as you say, it's about... I'm like you, I'm a big fan of capitalism, small state, let people make decisions themselves, let businesses earn money. I'm increasingly troubled by corporatism.
But the technology seems to be becoming the new government.
Yes, it does. You're absolutely right. And with algorithms, decisions are being made for you, which you have no control over anymore, because it's predicting what you might do and how you will think. And you can bet your life in future, your facial recognition to your own phone will be entry or exit to so many issues and so many things you have to do in the future.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It is. But I'm glad we're talking about it, because not everybody is. Right, thanks, guys. That's the end of our first hour. In the next few moments, we're going to be discussing former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. If you're just tuning in, he reportedly rejected advice from the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic, and lots more. You don't want to miss it. See you in 2.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. A lot of cloud around today, rather drab affair. Most of Scotland and Northern Ireland will stay dry. Much of England and Wales will stay dry, but here there will be a few showers around. High pressure is the dominant feature and will continue to be for much of this week. But around the high pressure, the winds go like this, clockwise, and so feeding in from the North Sea, quite a lot of cloud and some showers over eastern England, some getting into the Midlands, a few even getting into parts of Wales. Not too many in southern England. The odd one in southern parts of Scotland, but most of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry. And it's western Scotland where we'll continue to see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. Feeling pretty cold under this thicker cloud with the showers over northeast England and the Midlands, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. 9 or 10 is possible, particularly if you do see any brightness in the south. Generally, though, a pretty chilly feeling day leading into a cloudy night. We'll see more showers this evening over Wales in particular and southwest England. Nothing too heavy, and they should tend to clear away. And then some breaks in the cloud over the Midlands and southern England will allow some pockets of frost here, hint of blue on the chart, although most towns and cities will stay above. Western Scotland also getting a frost with some clearer skies here. Thursday's weather pattern's pretty similar, so again high pressure in control, but a few more showers likely tomorrow over parts of Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland too. Most of England and Wales should be dry on Thursday, and a brighter day for Wales and southern England. A bit more sunshine. Again, northwest Scotland may well do all right for sunshine too. And with a bit of sun, 10, 11 degrees. It'll feel a bit warmer where it stays drab in the east
even though it's drier, we're still only looking at highs of 7 or 8 Celsius. During Thursday evening, not a great deal of change, although I think we'll see the showers disappearing, so it looks largely dry as we head through Friday and into the weekend. Again, predominantly cloudy weather for Friday and the weekends, but not too many showers around. One thing though, it is set to turn colder through the weekend and into next week.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of March 2023. I'm Bev Turner. Today, huge COVID story. The Daily Telegraph are calling it the lockdown files. They've seen over 100,000 messages from the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, to others in government, exposing the chaos surrounding decisions which affected every single one of us in different ways, both then and now. Also this morning, police fear the missing baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon may have come to harm. The couple were arrested on Monday after 53 days on the run. It's a developing story. We will bring you the latest as it happens. Also this morning, we're going to be looking ahead to the Prime Minister's question time, where Rishi Sunak will expectedly take questions regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol and the newly formed Windsor Framework, live on GB News at 12. Very good morning to you. We've also been talking this morning about King Charles kicking the Sussexes out of Frogmore Cottage and putting in Prince Andrew. Do you agree with that? Let me know. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Lots still to come this morning, but first, let's get you up to speed with what's happening here and around the world with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Here's the latest. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock reportedly rejected advice from the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic. The Telegraph newspaper claims that Mr Hancock was advised to test all residents going into English care homes for COVID, not just those arriving from hospital. The article, which cites leaked WhatsApp messages, claims Mr Hancock was concerned that this would get in the way of his target of 100,000 daily tests. The spokesperson for the MP says the messages have been stolen and doctored to create a false story. Well, teams are now searching Brighton's largest nature reserve as they try to find the missing baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. It comes after the newborn's parents were further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The couple were captured on Monday night after almost 2 months on the run. Mountain rescue volunteers have also joined that search. Our reporter Mark White has more details.
Throughout the morning, mountain rescue teams as well as other specialist search teams have been arriving here to help those hundreds of police officers already at this location in this increasingly frantic search for the infant of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. They have, we're told, been uncooperative with police since their arrest on Monday evening. It was obvious, according to detectives, that the pair had been living outside, living rough for quite some time, and that's why the search operation is now concentrated on open spaces to the north end of Brighton, a 91 square mile search grid that they're currently looking at.
The President of Greece says she's cutting short a visit to Moldova following a train collision which killed at least 36 people and injured more than 80. An intercity train carrying over 300 passengers hit a freight train travelling in the opposite direction near the city of Larissa. The crash caused carriages to catch fire, with rescuers working through the night to find survivors. Labour claims the Prime Minister oversaw nearly £27 billion worth of wasteful government spending during his times as Chancellor and Chief Secretary to the Treasury. The party has compiled a report of so-called extensive waste, which includes money lost due to fraud and faulty personal protective equipment during the pandemic. The figures cover 2 financial years whilst he was in office. However, Conservative Party Chair Greg Hands has labelled the report a dodgy dossier. UK house prices fell by 1.1% year-on-year in February, according to the Nationwide Building Society. That marks the first annual decline since June of 2020. Now, last month, the average house price was around £257,000. Prices are now 3.7% lower than their peak in August of 2022. Professor of Economics at King's College London, Jonathan Portes, says he's not surprised by these figures.
We were expecting the housing market to weaken, both as a result of the general weakness in the economy and the squeeze on real incomes as a result of high inflation, but also, of course, the quite sharp rise in interest rates over the last year or so.
A report by MPs says NHS England will miss key recovery targets, including those for cancer treatments. The Cross-Party Public Accounts Committee says plans to tackle the COVID backlogs are already falling short and based on over-optimistic assumptions about winter health demands. It says the proportion of people receiving timely cancer treatment has actually fallen to a record low of 62%. The report also says the capacity of adult social care must improve if the recovery plan is to succeed. Teachers are striking today in the Midlands and eastern regions of England in a long-running dispute over pay. It's the second day of regional walkouts by members of the National Education Union, and it affects 200,000 staff. Many schools are either restricting access to pupils or fully closed. And new details have been discovered during cleaning and conservation work to prepare King Charles's coronation chair. Experts say they found previously undiscovered parts of a figure. It reveals more information about the chair's lavish construction 700 years after it was made. Henry VIII, Charles I, Queen Victoria and the late Queen Elizabeth were all crowned in the historic seat. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Bev.
Don't forget to stay with GB News this morning. We cover the Prime Minister's questions live at 12 o'clock. He's set to answer lots of questions regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol and indeed the newly formed Windsor Framework at lunchtime today. Now, Matt Hancock has disputed reports that he rejected expert COVID care home advice during his time as Health Minister. The Telegraph reports that over 100,000 WhatsApp messages sent between the former Health Secretary and other government ministers during the height of the COVID pandemic. The leaked messages suggest that Hancock rejected the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, to test all residents entering care homes, instead telling advisors that it risked muddying the waters, which is a strange phrase to use. Hancock has denied all allegations, saying the WhatsApp present a distorted account. Earlier, I spoke to Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK, and the partner of Isabel Oakeshott, the journalist who leaked these messages to the Daily Telegraph. Here's what he had to say.
The issue is what is in the overriding strategic public interest. And what became clear is that this is so significant, the difference between what we were all being told at the time by Matt Hancock and other ministers, as well as the Prime Minister and advisors, relative to the evidence that was actually that they were looking at, or indeed very often the lack of evidence. And that our real concern here, Bev, is that the public inquiry in the UK is literally just starting as we speak. And it looks like it's going to take at least 5 years, probably 10 years, cost hundreds of millions of pounds. And let's just consider, we need to learn the lessons, and we need to learn them rapidly about what went well and, bluntly, what went badly.
So joining me now is Tom Harwood. Tom, our viewers have been getting in touch. Ursula says, I think that Richard Tice and co will do anything to discredit the Conservative government in order to create credence for his own party. Is that playing a part in this?
Well, clearly that's what the people around Matt Hancock will be saying this morning. It has to be stated they are furious. They've alleged that Isabel Oakeshott has breached a legally binding non-disclosure agreement after Matt Hancock handed the contents of his phone to her for, of course, his Pandemic Diaries book. Now, of course, Isabel Oakeshott, for her part, says that this is a vital public interest story. She's written a long public interest defence in the pages of the Daily Telegraph this morning, and I suppose this one will be one for the courts to battle it out over, because Matt Hancock, for his part, says he's handed these texts over to the inquiry, and Isabel Oakeshott's argument is the inquiry will take too long for this stuff to sort of filter through into the public domain, that it was right for her to break that contract with Matt Hancock and publish them.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I'm with Isabel on that, of course. I've sort of given up on the COVID inquiry, really coming to any sort of conclusions that those of us who were lockdown sceptics might want to find. But there are a lot of people who are saying that this is a very strange thing to do, to win over the trust of Matt Hancock, to win over the trust of government ministers, to write this book and then to release all of this. I'm also wondering whether there are other MPs or former MPs, I'm thinking namely Boris Johnson, circling around at the moment and on the phone to lawyers and working out how this might blow back on them.
Well, certainly, Matt Hancock will have texted all senior government ministers. There'll be many conversations with many MPs that we have not yet seen published in the Daily Telegraph so far. No doubt there will be more stories to come in the coming days around all of these messages. Over 100,000 messages, over 2 million words. This is an extraordinary treasure trove of data, and no doubt we have only just scratched the surface. Any good publication would be holding back to drip feed some of that best information as the days go on. And yet there is this big question over propriety and data and ethics. And is Isabel Oakeshott at fault for releasing all of these messages? Although it must be said it's not a WikiLeaks-style data dump. There is proper journalistic, ethical work going in terms of which messages are public, and some parts of those messages are retracted by the Daily Telegraph as well, it must be said. They have done a proper job here. But on the other hand, is it Isabel Oakeshott's fault for publishing these messages in what she believes is the public interest? Or is it Matt Hancock's fault for handing so many sensitive messages to a journalist who, frankly, fundamentally disagrees with him on his main policy? Many people are commenting on social media today. This is as if Boris Johnson handed all of his texts over to a critical journalist. If Jeremy Corbyn handed his texts over to Tony Blair, if you can go through all of the rivalries in history, if Margaret Thatcher handed all of her data over to Michael Heseltine. I mean, these are the sort of comedic examples of what has gone on here. And really, there's a question in terms of whose judgment is at fault here. Many people are saying that Matt Hancock was really rather silly to hand over all that information to someone who is so deeply hostile to the policies he enacted for 2 years.
And also, the gullibility of him. I mean, we've seen it, we saw it in his choices post-politics, to go and do so many reality shows, to say that, you know, he fell in love and that he wants forgiveness from the public for kissing his girlfriend when everybody else was saying goodbye to their loved ones on iPads. He doesn't come out of this well. Some people are also saying on social media this morning, he's now being the fall guy, that there are other people behind the scenes who feel that as the dam bursts on some of the decisions that were made around COVID, that Matt Hancock is being thrown under the bus to take entirely full responsibility.
Yes, it is interesting. There are different arguments from so many different people. It's interesting how the front page of the Telegraph today is almost a defence of Chris Whitty, saying Chris Whitty's advice on the care home issue was correct. And yet what Matt Hancock is saying is actually there's a meeting that isn't included in this text exchange whereby actually the advice from the people around Chris Whitty and the medical office in the government had said, well, yes, it would be nice to test everyone, but we didn't have the capacity, so we're going to have to pick and choose who we test, and the choice was rather than community hospital. It's interesting, though, in this particular issue of testing, Matt Hancock was in charge of the NHS in England. There's also an NHS in Scotland and in Wales and in Northern Ireland. And each of those different NHSs, run by different political leaderships, of course, all of them, they all had the same care home problem at the same time. So I think there is a question there in terms of, was this actually Matt Hancock sort of overruling advisors? And if so, why did the same thing happen in Scotland, where the SNP were in control, or in Wales, where the Labour Party were in control? So some big questions there going forward.
There really are. Thank you, Tom. We're going to try and answer a few more of those questions now with the owner of Crabtree Care Homes, David Crabtree, and diagnostic and pathologist, co-chair of the Heart Group, Dr. Claire Craig. Good morning to you both. David, let me come to you first. Your reflections on this morning as the owner of care homes.
Every time Mr. Hancock appears in the media, it brings to the surface all the trauma, the emotion, the anger that we're trying to get through after 3 years. Mr. Hancock's crime is not one of whether he did this or did that. He lied, and then he said there was a protective ring around care homes, and Professor Vallance in January had said, do not discharge to care homes. Mr. Hancock's not a medic. So why he made this decision, and if it's in his defence, there was a further meeting in the afternoon, that's fine. But this man is supposed to be a politician and media savvy. The man's a disaster. And I'm convinced he would pass a lie detector test because he's deluded.
The other thing, just on you, David, before I come to you, Claire, is the fact that Helen Whately, who was the social care minister at the time, said that it was inhumane on WhatsApp. It is inhumane to not allow those in care homes to see their loved ones. That was also ignored. What do you make of that, David?
Exactly right. We were instructed that nobody could enter. We had visitors desperate to see their loved ones and who consequently died before they got to see them. We tried our best to make COVID-free zones, but we were left out to dry. Social care literally was left out to dry with no PPE, no protection. Idiots advising us. We know about infection. We know what to do. We didn't need all of this political basis. What we wanted was medical advice, and they said they were following the science. Obviously not.
Claire Craig, let me bring you in. Some of us knew they were following one version of the science, sort of infiltrated by a huge amount of political decisions as well. What do you draw from this, Claire? You've been monitoring this situation in the most minute detail since March 2020. Are there any smoking guns which explain why some of those decisions were made for you?
The problem with following the science
is that when you're following science that's wrong, which is, evidence that when it's not based on evidence, then you're going to make a fool of yourself. And that's what's happened here. And it's very, very strange to be having this conversation now, because everybody is still talking about this as if all COVID transmission happens through close contact, when we know and have known since mid-2021, it was a consensus that everybody agreed actually it spreads through the air, it can travel through long distances. And that's why we end up with a study in 2021 from Hamilton et al. Of a Cambridge care home, which showed that when they tested thoroughly in the care home, they found the virus with all the variation that was present in the Cambridge community, because they were sharing the air from the Cambridge community. And what that means is that any intervention, while it might postpone an exposure, because you're not going to have somebody, because it can spread through close contact, it's not going to prevent it, because if you're susceptible, you're going to catch it. And we know this because we had winter 2020 and 2021, when there were no visitors, there was massive testing, and care homes still saw a bad wave of deaths.
So, Claire, are you in a way defending Matt Hancock today by saying that it would have made a negligible difference to have tested people before they went back to the care homes?
In a strange way, I am, yes. And it puts me in a funny position because, obviously I think he's made mistakes. But on this, I don't think this mistake would have changed things. And that's a really, really important point to make. Now, whether or not he should, on the advice he was given, have made that decision, it's a separate issue about, how he makes decisions. But either way, I don't think it would have made any difference.
David, what do you make of that when you hear that analysis of the situation? That is an airborne virus with the average age of death of 82. The elderly were always more susceptible. There was very little that could realistically have been done, apart from maybe early treatments.
We had no deaths until we took in our own residents, not new residents, back from hospital who were not tested, who subsequently 3 days later developed signs and symptoms and 10 days later died. And as quite rightly said, this then spread across the home. And we knew from day one it was airborne. The masks and everything we were buying off eBay were preventative. Last week, we had a COVID outbreak, and we were able to contain that very, very quickly. It didn't spread. And isolation, staff testing. So it's still around. It's not as fatal as was in the early days. But in the early days, if they had tested prior to admission back into care homes, and this was evident across France and Italy, you reported it. Deaths in care homes across France and Italy were in January and February. The country knew what was coming. We chose not to put a zone around elderly. He chose, and the CQC and PHE England all knew this. CQC are the people who are supposed to protect patients. They were the ones who signatured the document Mr. Hancock published to say it was okay to not test asymptomatic people. He then went on to blame staff for being movement. That never happened. I accept the point that it's an airborne virus, and that's what caused the problems. But we were able to contain it, and have been able to contain it, because it's not gone away. We've still got COVID.
Claire, let me bring the last word to you on that. Are we any closer to having a better understanding of transmission, of treatments? I don't feel we've come very far in 3 years, to be completely honest.
No, I mean, I find this a bit frightening, really, because, as I said, the evidence it was airborne and spreading a long distance was mid-2021. And the emotion around how it spread means that people are so hung up on the old story that they're just not letting it go. And I don't know if they ever will now, even though the evidence is clear. And just one last point, actually, the text message that everybody's getting excited about was actually sent on the 14th of April, 2020. By then, cases had peaked and were falling. So it's like suggesting that King Canute should have got the army out and started firing at the sea. It would make no difference. It would make no difference. The tide was coming in.
OK, fascinating, both of you. Thank you so much. I need to move on. I'm so sorry, David. David Crabtree, the owner of care homes, and Dr. Claire Craig. We could talk about it all day. The emotion is strong. Fascinating, though, isn't it? Because I was a little bit torn on this information. As I said, I don't think that I've seen a smoking gun as yet, but I have other questions, much more questions, and in the next few days we might answer them. A spokesperson for Matt Hancock has said these stolen messages have been doctored to create a false story that Matt rejected clinical advice on care home testing. That is flat wrong. On April the 14th, Matt received a response to his request for advice from the chief medical officers that testing was needed for people going into care homes, which he enthusiastically accepted. Later that day, he convened an operational meeting on delivering testing for care homes, where he was advised it was not currently possible to test everyone entering care homes, which he also accepted. Matt concluded that the testing of people leaving hospital for care homes should be prioritised because of the higher risks of transmission, as it was not possible to mandate everyone going into care homes to get tested. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Still to come. A massive search is ongoing for the missing 2-month-old baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. I'm going to be joined by our Home and Security editor in just a few moments to get the latest on that. Don't go anywhere.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. A lot of cloud around today, rather drab affair. Most of Scotland and Northern Ireland will stay dry. Much of England and Wales will stay dry, but here there will be a few showers around. High pressure is the dominant feature and will continue to be for much of this week. But around the high pressure, the winds go like this, clockwise, and so feeding in from the North Sea, quite a lot of cloud and some showers over eastern England, some getting into the Midlands, a few even getting into parts of Wales. Not too many in southern England. The odd one in southern parts of Scotland, but most of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry. And it's western Scotland where we'll continue to see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. Feeling pretty cold under this thicker cloud with the showers over northeast England and the Midlands, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. 9 or 10 is possible, particularly if you do see any brightness in the south. Generally, though, a pretty chilly feeling day leading into a cloudy night. We'll see more showers this evening over Wales in particular and southwest England. Nothing too heavy, and they should tend to clear away. And then some breaks in the cloud over the Midlands and southern England will allow some pockets of frost here, hint of blue on the chart, although most towns and cities will stay above. Western Scotland also getting a frost with some clearer skies here. Thursday's weather pattern's pretty similar, so again high pressure in control, but a few more showers likely tomorrow over parts of Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland too. Most of England and Wales should be dry on Thursday, and a brighter day for Wales and southern England. A bit more sunshine. Again, northwest Scotland may well do all right for sunshine too. And with a bit of sun, 10, 11 degrees. It'll feel a bit warmer where it stays drab in the east, even though it's drier. We're still only looking at highs of 7 or 8 Celsius. During Thursday evening, not a great deal of change, although I think we'll see the showers disappearing, so it looks largely dry as we head through Friday and into the weekend. Again, predominantly cloudy weather for Friday and the weekends, but not too many showers around. One thing, though, it is set to turn colder through the weekend and into next week.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 11:28. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. So, a massive search is ongoing for the missing 2-month-old baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. The couple have been further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. Martin and Gordon appeared on January the 5th, disappeared after abandoning their burning vehicle in Greater Manchester. Well, joining me now is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who is in Brighton. Good morning, Mark. What is the latest? We saw you yesterday with the police searching the area. What's happening there now?
Well, that search is being expanded and more teams are joining that search as we speak. This morning, we filmed as mountain rescue teams arrived here to help their police colleagues, volunteers from Kent and from London and from other parts who've come down here to Brighton to help in what is the search of a very significant area, 91 square miles, from here in North Brighton down to Newhaven, where the couple had been spotted on a number of occasions in recent weeks. Now, all the police know is that this couple were living out in the open. They could tell by the state that they were in when they were arrested on Monday night that they had been living out in the open, sleeping rough, really. And that's why the searches so far have really been concentrated on open land and on some allotments just to the north of me here. It's a big patch of land full of kind of hundreds of greenhouses and other sort of makeshift buildings that were searched yesterday, but there'll be more detailed searches of that area of woodland around here. There's a golf course, a nature reserve, lots of land where this couple could have been. And because the couple are not being cooperative with the police, then it's really hampering the efforts of the police to locate the child in the first instance, of course, or to get any handle on where the couple may have been living, because clearly, if there is any hope of finding this child alive, then key to that would be to find where the couple were, assuming that they've not handed the baby on to a third party. Police said they are keeping that possibility open, but they don't think it's likely given the way that this couple have behaved since they first disappeared on the 5th of January, avoiding everyone, including the authorities, trying not to be seen on CCTV, and moving rapidly from Liverpool to Essex to East London down to Sussex latterly before they were finally caught on Monday night.
There in Brighton, still to come this morning. Can you guess which new form of transport has 3 times more drunken crashes than cyclists? Find out what I'm talking about after your morning's news with Ray.
Thanks, Bev. 11:31, here's the latest. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock reportedly rejected advice from the government's chief medical officer over care home testing during the pandemic. The Telegraph newspaper claims that Mr Hancock was advised to test all residents going into English care homes for COVID, not just those arriving from hospital. The article, which cites leaked WhatsApp messages, claims Mr Hancock was concerned that this would get in the way of his target of 100,000 daily tests. A spokesperson for the MP says the messages have been stolen and doctored to create a false story. Teams are now searching Brighton's largest nature reserve as they try to find the missing baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. It comes after the newborn's parents were further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The couple were captured on Monday night after almost 2 months on the run. The President of Greece says she's cutting short a visit to Moldova following a train collision which killed at least 36 people and injured 85. Last night, an intercity train carrying over 300 passengers hit a freight train travelling in the opposite direction near the city of Larissa. The crash caused carriages to catch fire, with rescuers working through the night to find survivors. And UK house prices fell by 1.1% year-on-year in February, according to the Nationwide Building Society, which marks the first annual decline since June 2020. Now, last month, the average house price was around £257,000. Prices are now 3.7% lower than their peak in August 2022. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Bev is up right now.
Still to come this morning, the number of UK children in food poverty has hit 4 million. So why do we still prioritise foreign aid over our own? We're going to be talking about that in just a while.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. I asked you before the break, what form of new transport do you think is more likely, 3 times more likely to be involved in drunken accidents than cyclists? Mike Parry, the answer is?
It's people on these mad scooters, okay?
E-scooters?
Yeah, e-scooters, yeah. I don't like to call them e-scooters. I don't know why they're called e-scooters. Why are they called e-scooters?
Well, I guess they're electric. E for electric. You plug them in and you charge them and they go about 35 miles an hour.
Yeah, A scooter, as we all know, for a little kid, has 1 foot on the platform and 1 foot off the platform. So they're not scooters, are they? They are lethal machines which are so narrow, they go like a bullet. At least a car and a motorbike has resistance from wind or something like that. They go whoosh like that. How many times have you yourself nearly been knocked down by an e-scooter, not coming towards you, at least you get notice of that, but one that's whizzed past you at 20 miles an hour on a pavement and literally left you spinning around?
Absolutely. They have low helmet usage, low age use them, and riding when you've had a few drinks. E-scooters sustain or cause more severe head injuries than cyclists, and there aren't as many of these as there are bicycles, Sam.
I mean, there's a reason why we put training wheels on a bicycle when we're teaching kids how to ride, because two wheels are less safe than 4. So why are we handing the keys?
An inch of rubber on each wheel.
Why are we handing the keys to these metal death traps to drunkards and vagabonds?
Yes. No.
I meant to say it.
I mean, under the law, I think I'm still right in saying you should only be riding an e-scooter if you've hired it.
I don't even know the legislation. It's completely
unless
opaque.
they've updated it when they were introduced and allowed in this country. It's so that you take it off a rack, a bit like a Boris bike in London all those years ago, right?
Yeah.
You get on it and you pay with your credit card for the amount of electricity you use, and then you put it back again. But no, people carry them around now like their own property, and you're quite right about the level of insecurity on them. I've for years argued that the police should stop cyclists at night who don't have lights. These are 10 times more dangerous because they come out at you out of the darkness on the pavement.
I'll tell you,
and you can't see them.
If you've ever seen an e-scooter barreling at you at 40 miles an hour on a pavement, you're going to be terrified for your life, quite frankly.
Well, they're trialling them in certain areas, aren't they? Because you can't legally ride them on the road. People do.
People do.
I saw 2 kids, in fact, coming home from GBNews a few weeks ago. A teenager on the front, a really young kid on the back.
Right.
And I did my usual mum thing, which is to go, get off the road, you're going to kill yourself. And guess what he did? He showed me one finger and zoomed off. I thought, well, you know what?
I mean, supposedly in cities, you're supposed to have to submit your driver's license in order to be able to use electric scooters.
Right.
And yet, if kids and teenagers are able to hop on them, literally, you can get any scooter, strap a car battery on the back of it, and off you go. Well, there's a complete lack of regulation that is putting people at risk.
If you think about the fact that the speed limit in London is generally 20 miles an hour, I don't ever get above 20 miles an hour everywhere.
No.
That is the legal speed limit. The scooters are flying past you on the pavement at more than 20 miles an hour.
They are.
Save the planet, though, Mike. It's all about saving the planet.
It's not. It's about allowing a certain group of people in society the recklessness to do what they want with total disregard to 99% of the population who are pedestrians, who don't stand a chance, as Sam's already said, in a collision who's going to come off worse.
I'm with you. Right, let's talk about food poverty. The number of British children in food poverty has doubled in a year to 4 million. Samantha, we saw the biggest transfer of wealth during the pandemic from the rich, from the poor to the rich. Food poverty is clearly a massive problem. 22% of households reported skipping meals, going hungry or not eating for a whole day in January, up from 12%. You know a bit about this, don't you? You grew up with free school meals in an environment that would be described as having food poverty.
Yeah, I went to school in Telford. I was homeless from the age of 16, and I benefited from free school meals throughout about half of my schooling. I was on free school meals. I was homeless, so I was literally moving from sofa to sleeping bag. I would sit in McDonald's sometimes with a cup of coffee, and for me, school was not just a place for learning. It was a place for a guaranteed hot meal, where I could shower, where I could be safe from the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I understand the bleeding hearts that are saying that school meals should be free for everyone. But quite frankly, we are already in an economic crisis, and prioritising those who have means-tested needs for support from the government when it comes to free school meals, those that receive universal credit or other equivalent benefits, should be prioritised. prioritised. The fact that affluent kids in southeast Surrey should be receiving free school meals and accessing the same support when it comes to meals that their parents and their families can afford to feed them is versus kids that were in my situation is beyond the pale.
It is, and this is the reason that Sadiq Khan, he will argue why he needs to give free school meals to all the children in London is because of the food poverty. I'm with Sam. The parents who can afford them pay for them.
Sadiq Khan only does anything if it's going to benefit him and raise him more money, OK? So this is for popularity. The mad Ulez zone, OK, is for him to raise money to plug all the gaps in his budget. His policies are never about common sense, and there's nothing common sense about this. I've always said poverty is relative, OK? And it's every parent's duty to provide meals for their children. That's why you have children. There's a deal in life. You have children, you automatically sign a deal to look after your children. Now, what I don't quite understand, and it's the same with food banks, where is the level where you qualify? Do you see what I mean? Food banks, I just don't get. Anybody can go along to a food bank, as far as I know, and say, I can't afford to feed my kids. Can I have 6 tins of beans, please?
Yes.
And walk out. This is the same. And Sam's made a very good point. I live on the border of Surrey and Greater London, OK? And there's been an influx of quite a lot of people from Hong Kong. It's a lovely part of the world. Housing's right price and all that. They're absolutely bemused and amazed that their children can get free school meals because they have easily the ability to pay for them.
And in my opinion, what I really, really don't like about these sorts of stories and about Sadiq Khan's posturing, you know, his big grand speech about we're plugging the gap because the Tory government couldn't, it feels like they're using disadvantaged children for political point scoring. That's all it is. I don't frankly think that Sadiq Khan gives a hoot about whether kids are going hungry, because if he did, then he would be prioritising support for those families that need it most, rather than these sweeping generalisations. Put the support into those that need it most. We have a welfare state to support those who cannot afford to support themselves.
A very generous welfare state.
From the youngsters to those of a more sophisticated vintage, let's say, Angela Rippon, 78 years old. Mike, she's got a piece in the Mail today saying that BBC basically said that she she should quit after she turned 50 because she was too old. She's fabulous. She does GB News breakfast, morning, weekend breakfast from time to time. I love her.
I do. She's a breath of fresh air because she's got so much energy. You know, we all remember her for flashing her legs on the Morecambe White show, on the Christmas show, but the energy she exudes when I see her in this very studio, you know, working here. But I've got a great story about Angela Rippon. This was John Burt, who wanted to revolutionise the BBC. You're told at 50, right? After that, she went to Boston and worked for a TV station in Boston, and I was the bureau chief of the Daily Express in New York. So I had to go up to Boston and, you know, review her first couple of shows, and you go into a bar in Boston and some guy shouts, "Oh, God, not that limey woman from London again." And it didn't bother her at all. I mean, she just got on with it, the quality of her broadcasting. But the story I've got for you is that after the first show, the people running the TV station wouldn't allow me any access to Angela Rippon, fellow countryman, I'm from the same country as her. No, sorry, not doing it. And I waited around for hours, nothing doing. So I disconsolately went back to my hotel, the Copley Plaza in the centre of Boston, and got into the lift, and Angela Rippon was in the lift. And it was like a gift from God, because I hadn't got enough to write about.
Are you stalking me, Mike Parry?
No, because I hadn't actually seen her on the set, you see. You know, she was in here and we were out there and all that. But I said, "Oh, Angela," I said, "you really could help me out here, you know." And she said, "What is it?" I said, "They wouldn't allow me." I said, "Come on, let's go and have a cup of coffee, right?"
Brilliant.
Of course, I didn't want to keep her up late because she had jobs the next day. But as you all know, in Fleet Street, 10 minutes with Angela Rippon can provide a 3-page spread. And so it did. She was absolutely terrific, honestly, and very kind, very helpful.
Amazing. I like to think that ageism is... It's not affecting you at the moment, Samantha, is it?
No, but I am very concerned by the idea that women in the media seem to have an expiration date put on us. How long are we on the shelf before we're shoved off for a newer product?
Well, you've got a few years to go, Sam.
Don't worry about it.
But I think this isn't...
I want to say if you press me, but you're all right. Right, we have come to the end of our show. Mike, Samantha, thank you so much. Come back again, won't you? Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow at 10.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. A lot of cloud around today, rather drab affair. Most of Scotland and Northern Ireland will stay dry. Much of England and Wales will stay dry, but here there will be a few showers around. High pressure is the dominant feature and will continue to be for much of this week. But around the high pressure, the winds go like this, clockwise, and so feeding in from the North Sea, quite a lot of cloud and some showers over eastern England, some getting into the Midlands, a few even getting into parts of Wales. Not too many in southern England. The odd one in southern parts of Scotland, but most of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry. And it's western Scotland where we'll continue to see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. Feeling pretty cold under this thicker cloud with the showers over northeast England and the Midlands, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. 9 or 10 is possible, particularly if you do see any brightness in the south. Generally, though, a pretty chilly feeling day leading into a cloudy night. We'll see more showers this evening over Wales in particular and southwest England, nothing too heavy, and they should tend to clear away. And then some breaks in the cloud over the Midlands and southern England will allow some pockets of frost here, hint of blue on the chart, although most towns and cities will stay above. Western Scotland also getting a frost with some clearer skies here. Thursday's weather pattern's pretty similar, so again high pressure in control, but a few more showers likely tomorrow over parts of Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland too. Most of England and Wales should be dry on Thursday, and a brighter day for Wales and southern England. A bit more sunshine. Again, northwest Scotland may well do all right for sunshine too. And with a bit of sun, 10, 11 degrees. It'll feel a bit warmer where it stays drab in the east, even though it's drier. We're still only looking at highs of 7 or 8 Celsius. During Thursday evening, not a great deal of change, although I think we'll see the showers disappearing, so it looks largely dry as we head through Friday and into the weekend. Again, predominantly cloudy weather for Friday and the weekends, but not too many showers around. One thing though, it is set to turn colder through the weekend and into next week.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.